I found out my husband went on a secret 15-day trip with the woman he calls his work wife. When he came home, I asked one simple question that wiped the smile off his face. Do you know what illness she has? He rushed to the doctor, but the truth was already waiting for him. Do you know what illness she has? Those words came out of my mouth so calmly, so casually, like I was asking about the weather or what he wanted for dinner. But the moment they hit the air between us, I watched my husband's face drain of color. His laptop bag slipped from his shoulder and crashed onto our hardwood floor. His hand went to his throat like he couldn't breathe. What? The word came out strangled, barely a whisper. Before we continue, if you believe that betrayal deserves consequences and truth deserves to be told, please consider subscribing. It's free and helps us reach more people who need to hear stories like this. Now let's see how this revenge unfolds. I kept my voice steady, clinical. Hazel, the illness. I'm assuming she told you, given how much time you spent together in Key West these past 15 days. Milo wasn't in Miami for business like he'd told me. He was in Key West with the woman he called his work wife. And I'd spent the entire 15 days he was gone gathering proof, credit card statements, Instagram photos, text messages he thought he'd deleted. I knew about the couple's massages, the romantic dinners, the secret apartment they'd leased together. I knew everything, but he didn't know that I knew. Not yet. And this question, this simple, terrifying question about a non-existent illness, was just the opening move. The thing that would make him panic, make him run to a clinic imagining the worst, make him feel a fraction of the fear I'd lived with for 8 days. There was no illness. Hazel was perfectly healthy. But Milo didn't need to know that. Not for a few more hours anyway. Let me take you back to how this all started. To the moment I realized the man I'd loved for 11 years had become a complete stranger. I met Milo Brennan on a Tuesday morning at a coffee shop in Manhattan when I was 25 years old. I just started my first real job after graduate school, working at a nonprofit that helped refugees settle in New York. The work was overwhelming and meaningful in equal measure, and I was running on 3 hours of sleep in desperation for caffeine. The barista called out an order and handed me a black coffee. I stared at it, confused because I'd ordered a vanilla latte. Before I could say anything, the man behind me in line spoke up. That's actually mine, but you look like you need the caffeine more than I do. He smiled when he said it. Not the practiced smile of someone trying to pick up women in coffee shops, but something genuine. The kind of smile that made his eyes crinkle at the corners. I'd laughed, tried to hand him the cup, and somehow we ended up talking for 20 minutes while both our drinks got cold. His name was Milo. He was 27, worked in corporate sales, and admitted he was also running late but couldn't bring himself to care anymore. He asked about my work, actually listened to my answers and remembered details. 2 days later, he showed up at my office with a vanilla latte and a napkin with his phone number written on it. That was Milo then. Thoughtful. The kind of man who texted to make sure you got home safe after drinks with friends. Who remembered your mother's birthday without being reminded. Who brought you soup when you had a cold even though he was terrified of getting sick himself. We dated for 2 years. Not the whirlwind romance of movies, but something steadier. We had dinner in cramped Brooklyn restaurants we couldn't afford, arguing good-naturedly about which neighborhood had the best pizza. We took weekend trips to the Catskills, hiking trails neither of us was properly equipped for, laughing when we got lost. We had late-night conversations about the future we'd build together, the trips we'd take, the apartment we'd get, the life we'd create. He proposed on a Wednesday evening while we were doing dishes together in his tiny apartment. No grand gesture, no public spectacle, just him turning to me with sudsy hands and saying, "I want to do this forever. You me. What do you think?" I said yes before he even pulled out the ring. We got married 2 years later in Prospect Park on a warm September afternoon. 60 people surrounded us, close friends and family, the people who mattered. My mother cried through the entire ceremony, dabbing at her eyes with tissues my sister kept handing her. Milo's father gave a toast about partnership and commitment that made even the cynical relatives tear up. We honeymooned in Maine, rented a cabin by the ocean, and spent a week eating lobster and reading books and planning our future. When we came back to reality, we moved into a 1-bedroom apartment in Crown Heights. It wasn't much, cramped kitchen, bathroom with questionable plumbing, radiator that clanked all night in winter, but it was ours. We argued about furniture placement. He wanted the couch facing the window for natural light. I wanted it facing the TV. We compromised by angling it diagonally, satisfying neither of us but feeling like a victory for marriage anyway. We adopted a rescue cat from the shelter on Nostrand Avenue, an orange tabby with an attitude problem who hated everyone except Milo. We named her Pepper. I pretended not to be jealous that she'd curl up in his lap but hiss when I tried to pet her. The years that followed were good. Not perfect, nobody's marriage is perfect, but solidly, reliably good. Milo climbed the corporate ladder at his sales job. He'd come home with stories about office politics and difficult clients, and I'd listen while making dinner. I managed community outreach programs at my nonprofit. The pay was terrible, but the work mattered. We helped people build new lives in a country that felt foreign and overwhelming. Money was always tight. We split grocery bills down to the dollar. We argued about whether we could afford to order takeout twice in 1 week, but we were building something. A partnership, a life that felt real and earned. We had our traditions. Every anniversary Milo would write me a card. Not just sign his name to something store-bought, but actually write. He'd list reasons he loved me, memories from the past year, promises for the next. I kept every single card in a box under our bed. On his birthday every year, I'd bake his favorite lemon cake from scratch. The recipe his grandmother had used, written on a stained index card I'd learned to decipher. These small rituals made us who we were, made us feel permanent. We talked about having kids, not immediately but someday, when we had more space, more savings, more time. When the time is right, we'd say, pushing the decision into some vague future that always felt close but never quite arrived. We fantasized about buying a house eventually, maybe in Westchester, maybe out on Long Island, somewhere with a yard and room for the children we'd have someday. A garden I'd probably kill through neglect but would try to maintain anyway. We'd grow old together, retire to somewhere warm, become the embarrassing grandparents who gave too many gifts and spoiled everyone's children. That was the foundation we'd built. 11 years of ordinary, unremarkable real life. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. It was solid, or at least I thought it was solid. Then Hazel Pearson walked into our lives and everything I thought I knew started to unravel. Milo mentioned her casually about 18 months ago. New account manager started today. Hazel. She seems really sharp. I'd said something like, "That's nice," and continued chopping vegetables for dinner. It wasn't notable. People got new coworkers all the time. But gradually, over the following weeks and months, her name appeared more frequently in his stories. Hazel said something hilarious in the team meeting. Hazel had this brilliant idea for the client pitch. Hazel and I grabbed lunch to discuss strategy. I didn't think much of it initially. Milo had work friends. That was healthy. Normal. I had work friends too. Then the term started appearing. Work wife. Hazel's basically my work wife at this point, he'd said one evening, laughing while telling me about some inside joke they shared. She knows what I'm thinking before I say it. It's kind of scary actually. I'd smiled, laughed along, said something supportive because that's what good wives do, right? We trust our husbands. We don't turn into those jealous, suspicious women who see threats in every female colleague. But there was a small knot forming in my stomach, a quiet discomfort I pushed down and ignored. I ignored how often Milo started checking his phone during dinner, how he'd angle the screen just slightly away from me when texting. I ignored the new cologne that appeared on our bathroom counter one day, something expensive and woody that I definitely hadn't bought him. I ignored the sudden gym membership after years of him claiming he was too tired to work out. I ignored how he'd come home from long days at the office, looking energized instead of exhausted. How he'd shower immediately instead of collapsing on the couch like he used to. How his work stories increasingly featured Hazel as the main character while I became the audience. I told myself I was being paranoid, that work was going well and he was happy about it, that the cologne was probably something a coworker recommended, that the gym membership was about getting healthier, maybe thinking about his upcoming high school reunion. I talked myself out of every single red flag because the alternative was too terrible to consider. We'd survived 11 years together. Graduate school poverty, career changes, the death of his mother, my father's cancer scare, arguments about money and in-laws and whose turn it was to clean the bathroom. We'd weathered everything life had thrown at us. Hazel was just a colleague, just a work wife, nothing more. That's what I told myself. That's what I needed to believe. Because if I was wrong, if there was something more happening, it would mean that everything I'd built was a lie, that the man I'd trusted completely had been deceiving me, that our marriage, our partnership, our 11 years together, was crumbling while I stood by oblivious. I couldn't face that possibility, so I didn't. I ignored every warning sign, every instinct that told me something was wrong, every small change in his behavior that didn't quite add up. I ignored it all until 3 months ago when Milo came home with news about a business trip to Miami. The trip that would finally force me to see what I'd been refusing to see all along. The trip where everything I'd been ignoring would become impossible to deny. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you about that announcement. About how he sold me the lie so convincingly that I actually helped him pack for it. About how I kissed him goodbye and wished him luck. having no idea that I was sending my husband off on a romantic vacation with another woman. 3 months ago, Milo came home from work on a Tuesday evening with news he could barely contain. He was practically vibrating with excitement as he dropped his briefcase by the door. "I got it," he said, grinning wider than I'd seen in months. "The Miami account. They want me to lead the entire pitch." I looked up from the nonprofit grant proposal I'd been reviewing at our kitchen table. "That's amazing. When do you present?" "That's the thing." He pulled out his laptop, already opening his calendar. "They want us down there for the full process. Multiple presentation rounds, strategy sessions, relationship building. It's going to be about 2 weeks. 2 weeks. That was longer than his usual 3-day conferences. But this was clearly important to him. His entire face was lit up with the kind of professional pride I hadn't seen in a while. "The client is pretty demanding," he continued, clicking through what looked like a detailed itinerary. "Back-to-back meetings, working dinners every night. It's going to be intense, but this could change everything for my career." VP Track Isla. "This is VP Track material." I got up and hugged him. "I'm so proud of you. You've worked so hard for this." He held me tight, and I remember thinking in that moment how solid we felt. How lucky I was to have a partner whose success I could celebrate. How our life together was exactly what I'd always wanted. "When do you leave?" I asked. "Next Friday. I know it's soon, but they want to move fast." He pulled back, looked at me with what seemed like genuine regret. "I'm going to miss you like crazy." "I'll miss you too. But it's only 2 weeks." I smiled, already thinking about how I'd surprise him when he got back. Maybe plan a nice dinner. Open that expensive wine we'd been saving. "Hey, what if I take some time off and come with you? I could explore Miami while you're in meetings. We could have the evenings together." His expression shifted, just slightly, but I caught it. A flicker of something, panic, annoyance, before the smile returned. "That's sweet, but it wouldn't really work," he said, closing his laptop. "The meetings are going to run late into the evenings, sometimes until 10 or 11. I'd feel terrible leaving you alone in a hotel room every night. You'd be bored out of your mind." "I wouldn't mind. I could." "Isla." His tone sharpened. "This is work. Important work. I need to focus completely on landing this account. I can't be worried about entertaining you or making sure you're having a good time. This is my career we're talking about." The words stung more than they should have. I felt myself pulling back, felt the familiar guilt of being too needy, too clingy, asking for too much. "You're right," I said quietly. "I'm sorry. I wasn't thinking." His face softened immediately. He reached for my hand. "Hey, I didn't mean it like that. This is a huge opportunity and I need to be completely focused. You understand, right?" I nodded. I did understand, or at least I thought I did. The next 2 weeks before his departure, Milo threw himself into preparation. He practiced his presentations in our living room while I listened and offered feedback. He revised slides late into the night. He took conference calls at odd hours, always stepping into our bedroom and closing the door for privacy. "Clients in a different time zone," he'd explain when I asked. "Easier to catch them early morning or late evening." I helped him pack. We stood at our bedroom closet together, debating which shirts looked most professional, which ties conveyed confidence without arrogance. I reminded him to pack his phone charger, his good dress shoes, the lucky cufflinks his father had given him. The morning he left, I kissed him goodbye at our apartment door, straightened his collar, told him to make us proud. "I'll call you every night," he promised, hugging me tight. "Even if it's late." "I'll be waiting," I said. He rolled his suitcase down our hallway and disappeared into the elevator. I stood in our doorway watching until the doors closed, then went back inside to what I thought would be a routine 2 weeks alone. The first 3 days he kept his promise. He called every evening around 9 or 10. Brief conversations, he sounded tired, distracted. The meetings were exhausting. The client was demanding. Everything was more complicated than expected. "How's the hotel?" I'd ask, trying to keep him talking, trying to maintain connection across the distance. "Fine. Standard business hotel. Nothing special." His answers were clipped, like he was eager to end the conversation. "Listen, I should get to bed. Early meeting tomorrow." By the 4th day the calls stopped. Text messages replaced them. *, too exhausted to talk. Meetings ran until midnight. "Love you. *, client dinner went late. Heading to bed. Talk tomorrow." Something felt wrong. A quiet unease I couldn't name but couldn't shake. I told myself I was being paranoid. He was working hard. Of course he was tired. Of course business trips were exhausting. But that unease grew. On day 5 I did something I'd never done before. Something that would have felt like a violation of trust if our marriage had been what I thought it was. I called the Marriott downtown Miami, the hotel he'd mentioned offhandedly in one of our brief conversations. "Good afternoon, Marriott downtown Miami," the receptionist answered cheerfully. "How can I help you?" "Hi, yes, I need to be connected to my husband's room. Milo Brennan." Pause. The sound of typing. Another pause, longer this time. "I'm sorry, ma'am. We don't have a guest by that name currently checked in. My stomach dropped. Can you check again? Milo Brennan. He would have checked in last Friday. More typing. No ma'am. I'm showing no reservation under that name for the past week. I thanked her and hung up, my hands shaking. Maybe I'd gotten the hotel name wrong. Maybe he'd said a different Marriott. I called back. Actually, which Marriott location is this? Downtown Miami, ma'am. Would you like me to transfer you to one of our other Miami locations? I had her check 3 other Marriotts in the Miami area. Nothing. No Milo Brennan at any of them. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in our bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to come up with innocent explanations. Maybe his company had booked the room under a corporate account. Maybe it was under someone else's name for business reasons. Maybe I was remembering wrong about which hotel chain he'd mentioned. But the unease had become something sharper, something that felt like dread. I got up at 2 in the morning and opened my laptop, logged into our joint credit card account, the one we used for everything: groceries, utilities, shared expenses, the one that would show charges from his business trip since he sometimes had to pay up front and expense things later. I pulled up the transactions from the past 5 days, and there they were. Charges from Florida, but not from Miami, from Key West. I stared at the screen, reading each transaction 3, 4, 5 times, hoping I was misunderstanding, hoping there was some explanation that made sense. Louis' Backyard, Key West, Florida, $187. Blue Heaven, Key West, Florida, $143. Sunset Water Sports, Key West, Florida, $220. The Marker Resort, Key West, Florida, $480. I clicked on the Marker Resort charge, my hands trembling so badly I could barely control the mouse. The merchant description read, "Romance package, couples massage and champagne." The words blurred. My vision tunneled. I couldn't breathe. My husband wasn't in Miami on a business trip. He was in Key West. He'd lied about where he was going. He'd lied about what he was doing. And he was spending our joint money on romantic couples activities. I knew. Even before I let myself think it consciously, I knew. Hazel, his work wife, the woman whose name had been appearing in his stories with increasing frequency for 18 months, the woman he claimed to have a connection with, the woman he'd been texting at midnight. I sat at our kitchen table in the dark, staring at those credit card charges, and felt something inside me break. Or maybe it was the opposite. Maybe something that had been cracking for months finally shattered completely, and what was left was clarity. Cold, sharp, devastating clarity. My marriage was a lie. My husband was in Key West with another woman, and I'd been sitting here like a fool, trusting him, helping him pack for his romantic vacation, kissing him goodbye and wishing him luck. The humiliation was suffocating, the betrayal was crushing. But underneath those emotions something else was building, something harder and colder. I opened a new spreadsheet, started documenting every charge. Date, location, amount, merchant name, creating evidence, building a case. Because if Milo thought he was going to get away with this, if he thought he could come home and continue lying to my face, he was wrong. I was done being the trusting wife, done being the fool. I was going to find out exactly what my husband had been doing, and then I was going to make sure he faced every single consequence. I spent the next 2 days gathering more evidence. Not just credit card statements and Instagram photos, but everything. I recovered deleted text messages from our shared iCloud account, a feature Milo had apparently forgotten existed when he thought he was being careful. The messages went back 18 months. I read all of them, sitting cross-legged on our bedroom floor with my laptop, forcing myself to absorb every word even when it felt like swallowing glass. The early texts were innocent enough. Work coordination, meeting times, client strategy discussions. But around month 3 something shifted. The messages became more frequent, more personal. Inside jokes appeared. Compliments that crossed professional boundaries. "Milo, you looked amazing in that presentation today. Client couldn't take his eyes off you." "Hazel, stop, you're the one who killed it. We make a good team." "Milo, the best team." By month 6 they were texting at midnight, at 6 in the morning, during times when Milo was supposedly asleep beside me in our bed. The progression was mapped out in digital timestamps. The slow slide from colleagues to something else entirely. But it was the messages from 2 months ago that destroyed me. The ones where they planned the trip. "Hazel, can't wait for Miami, 2 weeks of just us." "Milo, I know. I hate lying to Isla, but she'd never understand." "Hazel, what she doesn't know won't hurt her. Besides, you said the marriage has been dead for years anyway." Dead for years. I sat there staring at those words until they stopped making sense as language and became just shapes on a screen. Dead for years. Our marriage. The partnership I thought was solid. The life we'd built together. We'd celebrated our anniversary 3 months ago. He'd stood up at dinner with tears in his eyes and talked about how grateful he was for me, for us, for everything we'd created together. He'd listed specific moments from the past year. Trips we'd taken, quiet mornings making coffee, arguments we'd worked through. He'd made everyone at the restaurant table cry with how sincere he sounded. And apparently the entire time he'd been telling Hazel our marriage was dead. I screenshot every message, organized them chronologically, backed them up to 3 different cloud services. Then I sat on our bedroom floor and cried until my throat was raw and my eyes were swollen. When I was done crying, something strange happened. The grief didn't disappear, but it transformed into something else. Something colder and sharper. Something that felt like clarity. I wasn't going to fall apart. I wasn't going to confront him in tears and beg for explanations. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing me destroyed. I was going to be strategic, calculated. I was going to make him feel exactly what I'd felt, and then I was going to make sure he faced every consequence he'd been so carefully avoiding. On day 7 of Milo's trip, the day I saw the Instagram photo, I'd been too shocked to think clearly. By day 8 I was planning. By day 9, I knew exactly what I'd do when he came home. The question about the illness came to me at 3 in the morning on day 10. I was lying in bed, unable to sleep, thinking about how Milo must feel so safe right now. So confident that he'd gotten away with everything. That he could come home and slip back into his role as devoted husband and I'd never be the wiser. He needed to feel unsafe. Needed to feel the panic I'd felt scrolling through those credit card charges. Needed to experience the terror of consequences he hadn't anticipated. There was no illness. I knew that. Hazel was perfectly healthy as far as I was aware. But Milo didn't know what I knew. And more importantly, he didn't know what I didn't know. One ambiguous question. That's all it would take. Let his guilty conscience and his imagination do the rest. I rehearsed it over and over. The timing, though. The exact wording that would be just vague enough to let him spiral. By the time his key turned in our apartment lock on day 15, I was ready. I'd cleaned the apartment until it sparkled. Every surface spotless. Floors vacuumed. Dishes done. I'd bought ingredients for his favorite dinner, the pasta dish with the complicated sauce that took 2 hours to make. I'd put on the blue dress he'd always said he loved, the one I wore on our anniversary. I was the picture of the devoted wife, the woman who'd waited patiently for her hardworking husband to return from his important business trip. God, I missed you, Milo said as he pushed through the door, dropping his duffel bag and reaching for me with arms that had probably held Hazel hours earlier. I hugged him back, let him hold me, studied his face while he smiled. He looked different, not dramatically but in small ways that added up. His hair was lighter, sun-bleached in a way that didn't happen in conference rooms. His skin had that bronze glow that comes from beach days, not fluorescent office lighting. There were new freckles scattered across his nose. His shoulders were relaxed in a way they never were after actual business trips. He looked like someone who'd just had the vacation of his life. How was it? I asked, keeping my voice warm but not eager. Brutal, he sighed, running a hand through that sun-streaked hair. Back-to-back presentations, client dinners every night. I barely slept, but we landed the account, so it was worth it. I nodded, made interested sounds, asked follow-up questions. Was the hotel nice? Standard business hotel. Nothing special. You know how those places are. How was the weather in Miami? Hot, humid, classic Florida. He was already moving toward the bedroom with his suitcase. I need a shower. I feel disgusting from the flight. Every word out of his mouth was a lie, and he delivered them so smoothly, so confidently, like he'd had 15 days to practice his story and now he was performing it flawlessly. I followed him to the bedroom, watched him unpack, watched him sort through clothes that smelled like ocean air and expensive resort laundry detergent. I'm sure Hazel was a big help with the presentation, I said casually, like I was making conversation. He froze. Just for a second, just long enough. His hand paused in the middle of pulling a shirt from his suitcase. His shoulders tensed. Then he forced himself to relax, to keep moving, to act natural. Hazel? Yeah, she did great. You know her. Always prepared, really pulled her weight. But his voice was too bright, too casual. The tone of someone working very hard to sound normal. I nodded slowly. I do know her. That's why I was surprised when I found out. The silence that followed was beautiful. I counted it in my head. 3 seconds of him standing there frozen, trying to figure out what I meant, what I knew, how much danger he was in. Found out what? His voice had changed. The false brightness was gone. Now he sounded wary. I didn't answer immediately, just looked at him, let the silence stretch. Let his imagination start working. Let him wonder. Then I turned and walked toward the kitchen. I'm making your favorite for dinner, I called over my shoulder. The pasta with the complicated sauce. It'll be ready in about an hour. I heard him follow me, heard him hovering in the doorway, uncertain. His confident homecoming energy had evaporated completely. Now he looked like someone who just realized he might be standing on unstable ground. I pulled out vegetables, a cutting board, a knife, started prepping dinner with deliberate calm. Let him watch. Let him wonder what I knew. Let his guilt and paranoia do the work for me. Isla. His voice had an edge now. What did you find out? What are you talking about? I turned to face him, knife in hand, expression neutral. And then I asked the question that would change everything. Do you know what illness she has? The color drained from his face like someone had pulled a plug. His laptop bag, still slung over his shoulder, slipped off and crashed to the floor with a thud that echoed through our small apartment. What? The word came out strangled, barely a whisper, kept my voice level, clinical, like I was discussing the weather. Hazel, the illness. I'm assuming she told you, given how much time you spent together these past 15 days. I watched it happen in real time, watched his hand go to his throat, watched his face cycle through confusion, panic, horror, watched him start making connections, imagining consequences, spiraling into exactly the fear I wanted him to feel. Isla, I don't. What are you talking about? But even as he said it, his other hand was reaching for his phone. Already planning to call Hazel. Already panicking. It's serious, Milo. The kind of thing that doesn't just go away. The kind of thing that spreads through close contact. I paused. Let that sink in. You'll want to get tested. Today probably. The clinic on Flatbush is open until 7. I turned back to my vegetables. Started chopping. The knife hit the cutting board in steady rhythmic thuds. Behind me I heard Milo's breathing accelerate. What illness? His voice was rising now, cracking. Isla, what the hell are you saying? What's wrong with Hazel? I didn't turn around, just kept chopping with meticulous precision. The clinic closes at 7, I repeated calmly. Better hurry. I heard him frantically trying to call Hazel. Once, twice, 3 times. Each call going to voicemail. She's not answering. Pure panic now. Isla, please, tell me what's going on. What illness? What are you talking about? I set down the knife, turned to look at him. My husband of 11 years stood in our kitchen, white-faced and trembling, terrified of consequences he'd never considered when he was booking romantic getaways and lying to my face. Part of me felt satisfaction. A larger part felt absolutely nothing. Go get tested, Milo, I said quietly. Then we'll talk. He stared at me for 3 more seconds. Then he grabbed his keys and phone and ran. The door slammed. His footsteps thundered down the stairs. The building entrance crashed open. Then silence. Only then did I let my hands shake. Only then did I grip the counter for support. Only then did I allow myself a small, bitter smile. There was no illness. Hazel was perfectly healthy. But for the next few hours, Milo would sit in a clinic waiting room imagining every worst-case scenario, feeling the panic and fear and dread I'd lived with for 8 days. It wasn't revenge yet, but it was a start. I stood in the kitchen for a full minute after Milo left, listening to the silence settle around me. Then I walked to the wine rack and pulled out the bottle he'd been saving, a Pinot Noir from some boutique vineyard in Oregon that he'd talked about for months. For a special occasion, he'd said when he brought it home. Something to celebrate. This felt special enough. The cork came out with a satisfying pop. I poured myself a generous glass and carried it to the living room, where I'd hidden my evidence folder under a stack of magazines on the coffee table. I spread everything across our gray sectional like a detective laying out a crime scene. Credit card statements organized by date. Instagram screenshots with timestamps. Text message transcripts I'd printed and highlighted. Hotel receipts. A timeline I'd constructed with color-coded markers. Green for suspicious behavior, yellow for confirmed lies, red for proof of the affair. Looking at it all laid out like this, I could see the complete picture. The affair hadn't started suddenly. It had been building for 18 months, each small choice leading to the next. The progression was mapped out in front of me like a roadmap of betrayal. My phone buzzed. Milo, from what I assumed was the clinic waiting room. What illness? Hazel isn't answering. What illness? I took a sip of wine and didn't respond. Another buzz 30 seconds later. Isla, please. I'm freaking out. What are you talking about? I set my phone face down on the coffee table and took another sip. Let him sit with that uncertainty. Let him imagine worst-case scenarios in that sterile waiting room. Let him feel the sick dread of not knowing, of consequences lurking just out of sight. I'd spent 8 days living with that feeling. He could handle a few hours. I pulled my laptop over and logged into our bank account, something nagging at the back of my mind. There'd been a large withdrawal 3 months ago, $30,000 from our savings. When I'd noticed it at the time and asked, Milo had explained it away smoothly. Investment opportunity through work, he'd said. Short-term thing. We'll get it back with interest in 6 months. Trust me. I trusted him. Of course I had. Why wouldn't I? But now, sitting here surrounded by evidence of his lies, that explanation felt hollow. I started searching our apartment for any paperwork related to that transfer. I found it in the bottom drawer of his desk, buried under old tax returns and expired insurance documents. A manila folder with Williamsburg apt written on the tab in his handwriting. Inside was a lease agreement, 2-bedroom apartment on North 6th Street in Williamsburg. Prime location, probably expensive as hell. Signed by Milo Brennan and Hazel Pearson. Move-in date, December 1st. 3 weeks from now. Security deposit, $6,000. First month's rent, $4,200. Last month's rent, $4,200. That accounted for $14,400 of the missing money. I flipped through more papers. Receipts from West Elm and CB2. They'd already ordered furniture. A gray sectional, not unlike the one I was currently sitting on. A reclaimed wood dining table. A bedroom set in what the receipt described as modern minimalist style. There were paint swatches stapled to one of the papers. Pale blue for the living room, sage green for the bedroom. Someone, probably Hazel based on the handwriting, had written notes in the margins. This one, calming and sophisticated. They hadn't just been having an affair. They'd been building a home together, choosing furniture, picking out paint colors, planning a life. The lease was for 2 years with an option to renew. 2 years. They'd committed to 2 years together. This wasn't a fling. This wasn't a mistake. This was a calculated exit strategy from our marriage and a planned entrance into a new life with her. I took photos of every page with shaking hands, added them to my evidence folder, backed everything up to the cloud. Then I poured another glass of wine because the first one wasn't doing its job anymore. My phone buzzed again, 3 times in rapid succession. They're running tests now. Full panel. This is insane. Why won't you answer me? Hazel still isn't picking up. What is going on? I ignored all of it and opened my laptop again. If Milo had hidden a lease agreement, what else was buried in our shared computer that I'd never thought to look for? I found his messages app still synced to the desktop. I'd already read his texts with Hazel, but I hadn't checked his conversations with anyone else. I started with his brother Ryan. Ryan had been at our apartment for dinner 2 weeks ago. He'd brought wine and told funny stories about his new job. He'd hugged me goodbye and told me to take care of myself. He'd seemed genuinely warm and kind. But scrolling through his messages with Milo, I found something different. From 3 months ago, right around when Milo signed that lease. Ryan, are you seriously doing this? Leaving Isla for your coworker? Milo, it's not that simple. Isla and I have been drifting for years. Hazel gets me in ways Isla never did. Ryan, dude, you've been married 11 years. You don't just throw that away because someone at work gets you. That's not how marriage works. Milo, I'm not throwing it away. It's already gone. I'm just making it official. Ryan, does Isla know any of this? Milo, not yet. I'll tell her after the holidays. No point ruining everyone's Christmas. Ryan, this is going to destroy her. Milo, she'll be fine eventually. People get divorced all the time. He's strong. She'll land on her feet. I stared at that last message. She'll be fine eventually. Like I was some minor inconvenience, some obstacle to overcome on his path to happiness with Hazel. Ryan knew. Milo's brother had known for 3 months that my husband was planning to leave me, and he'd said nothing. He'd sat at our dinner table eating the food I'd cooked, laughing at jokes, pretending everything was normal. Another betrayal to add to the collection. I kept scrolling, found messages to his parents from 2 months ago where he'd started laying groundwork. Milo, just wanted to give you guys a heads up that Isla and I have been having some problems. Nothing catastrophic, but things have been tense. We might need some space to figure things out. Setting up the narrative, making it seem mutual, making it seem like our marriage had been failing gradually rather than being actively destroyed by his choices. I found messages to his coworkers in a group chat. Coworker, you and Hazel seem pretty close lately. Anything we should know about? Milo, we're just friends. Work friends. She's good at what she does and we collaborate well. Different lies for different audiences. To Ryan, he admitted the affair but framed himself as the victim of a dead marriage. To his parents, he suggested we were both struggling. To his coworkers, he denied everything. To Hazel, he'd said our marriage had been dead for years. The sheer complexity of maintaining all these separate stories was staggering. He must have been exhausted keeping track of what he'd told whom. My phone rang this time instead of buzzing with a text. Milo calling. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again 30 seconds later. Voicemail again. Then a text. Please pick up. They're asking me questions I don't know how to answer. What am I supposed to tell them? I took another sip of wine and went back to my laptop. There was one more thing I needed to check. One more timeline I needed to verify. I pulled up Hazel's text with Milo again. but this time I searched for a specific date. The day I'd miscarried. The day I'd called him 17 times and gotten 2 irritated responses. I found the messages easily. Hazel, 11:23 a.m. The exact time I'd been sitting in the ER waiting room. Can't believe we still have 5 more days here. This has been perfect. Milo, 11:31 a.m. I know. I never want it to end. Real life is going to suck when we get back. Hazel, 11:45 a.m. We don't have to go back to real life. We could make this our real life. The apartment. Actually being together instead of hiding. Milo, 11:52 a.m. soon. After the holidays. I promise. Just a couple more months and we can stop pretending. Hazel, 12:03 p.m. I love you. Milo, 12:07 p.m. I love you too. That entire exchange had happened while I was bleeding through my clothes in a hospital waiting room. While I was cramping and terrified and desperately trying to reach him. While I was losing our baby alone. He'd been texting his mistress about their perfect vacation and their future together and how much he loved her. I'd called him at 12:15 p.m. He'd answered annoyed. Isla, I'm in the middle of something. Can this wait? It couldn't wait, but I hadn't told him that. Hadn't wanted to burden him during his important business trip. Had still been trying to be the supportive wife. The full weight of it hit me then. Not just the affair. Not just the lies. But the timing. The specific cruelty of him planning his exit from our marriage while I was losing the baby we'd made together. I'd spent the last 8 days wondering if maybe I could forgive him. If maybe we could work through this. If maybe the affair was a symptom of problems in our marriage that we could address. But looking at these messages, looking at the timeline of his betrayal layered over the timeline of my loss, I knew there was nothing left to salvage. Milo hadn't made a mistake. He'd made hundreds of choices, each one deliberate, each one moving him further away from me and closer to her. And he'd done it all while I was being faithful, trusting, devoted. I'd been a fool, but I was done being a fool. My phone buzzed again. Leaving clinic now. We need to talk. I set down my wine glass, closed my laptop, gathered the evidence scattered across the couch and organized it back into my folder. When Milo came home this time, I wouldn't be asking cryptic questions. I'd be showing him exactly what I knew, and then I'd watch him try to explain his way out of the truth. For hours after he'd fled to the clinic, I heard Milo's key in the lock again. This time there was no confident energy, no easy smile. The door opened slowly, cautiously, like he wasn't sure what he'd find on the other side. He looked terrible. His face was pale, almost gray. His eyes were red-rimmed and hollow. His shirt was wrinkled like he'd been gripping it in his fist. He stood in the doorway without entering like he was afraid to cross the threshold. There's nothing wrong with me, he said, his voice flat. They ran every test. Blood work, full STD panel, everything. I'm negative for everything. I was still on the couch where I'd spent the past 4 hours, wine glass in hand, evidence folder beside me. I'd turned off most of the lights, leaving only the single lamp by the window. The dim lighting made the space feel smaller, more oppressive, more like an interrogation room than a home. That's good news, I said, taking a slow sip of wine. Is it? He finally stepped inside, closed the door behind him, but stayed leaning against it like he needed the support. Because you sent me to a clinic thinking I'd been exposed to what, exactly? You never said what illness Hazel supposedly has. His voice wavered between relief and confusion, between gratitude that he was healthy and anger that I'd put him through that panic. That's because Hazel doesn't have an illness, Milo. I set down my wine glass with deliberate care. She's perfectly healthy as far as I know. The confusion on his face would have been funny if the situation weren't so devastating. I watched him try to process what I'd just said, watched the gears turning as he tried to understand. Then why? He started. Because I needed you to feel it. I cut him off. The panic, the fear, the sick dread of wondering what consequences are coming for choices you thought were consequence-free. I leaned forward slightly. I needed you to sit in that clinic waiting room and imagine the worst, because that's what I've been doing for the last 8 days. 8 days. He moved away from the door, took a few tentative steps toward me, then stopped. Isla, what are you talking about? What happened 8 days ago? His voice had shifted to that placating tone he used when he was trying to smooth things over. The tone that used to work on me because I wanted to believe everything was fine. The tone that made me feel like I was overreacting or being unreasonable. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I picked up my phone from the coffee table, opened Sarah's email, held up the Instagram screenshot so Milo could see it clearly. I watched his face change, watched shock register first, then recognition, then something that looked like resignation. The mask he'd been wearing, the concerned, confused husband, crumbled completely. Key West, I said quietly, not Miami. With Hazel, for 15 days. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Isla, I can explain. Don't. I held up my hand. Before you start crafting your explanation, Before you insult me with some story about last-minute itinerary changes or mandatory team-building exercises or whatever lie you've prepared, I know everything. I reached for my evidence folder, opened it, pulled out the first credit card statement. I know you charged a couple's massage to our joint credit card. $480 for the romance package at the Marker Resort. Champagne and chocolate-covered strawberries included. I set it on the coffee table between us. I know you had dinner at Latitudes on Tuesday night. $65 entrees. They're famous for engagement proposals there. Very romantic. I pulled out another document. I know you texted Hazel at 11:47 p.m. saying, "Can't sleep. Come to my room." That was Wednesday night. You told me you had early meetings and had to get rest. Each piece of evidence landed between us like stones. I watched Milo's face go from pale to ashen, watched him sink slowly into the armchair across from me like his legs couldn't hold him up anymore. I know you told her our marriage has been dead for years. I pulled out the printed text messages, which is fascinating because 3 months ago you were crying at our anniversary dinner. You stood up and gave that whole speech about how grateful you were for me, for us, for the life we'd built together. You made everyone at the table tear up. I set the papers down. So either you're an incredible actor or you're an incredible liar. Maybe both. Isla. His voice cracked. I'm not finished. I held up my hand again. There's more. And you're going to sit there and listen to all of it. He slumped further into the chair, defeated. Here's what really gets me, Milo. I leaned forward, made sure he was looking at me. Here's the part that I've been thinking about for 8 days straight, that's kept me up every single night. I took a breath. This was the hardest part, the part that hurt the most. 2 weeks before you left for your business trip, I took a pregnancy test in our bathroom while you were at work. My voice was steady but quiet. It was positive. We were pregnant. After a year of talking about starting a family, of me researching fertility doctors, of planning for our future, it finally happened. Milo's face went from ashen to green. His hand gripped the armrest so hard his knuckles went white. I was going to tell you that Friday. I had it all planned. Your favorite dinner, sparkling cider, maybe a little pair of baby shoes as a hint. I swallowed hard. But Thursday night you got that emergency call about Miami. Said you had to leave the next morning. Asked for a rain check on our Friday dinner. Isla, he whispered. I decided I'd wait and tell you when you got back. Make it even more special. A surprise for when you came home. I pulled out my phone, showed him my call log. But 5 days into your Key West vacation I started bleeding. Heavy. Painful. Undeniable. His hand went to his mouth. I called you 17 times that afternoon, Milo. 17 times. You answered twice, both times annoyed that I was interrupting your critical meeting, both times asking if it could wait. I showed him the texts between him and Hazel from that day, the ones I'd found earlier. You want to know what you were doing while I was calling you? While I was bleeding and terrified and needed you. I read them aloud. Can't believe we still have 5 more days here. This has been perfect. That was Hazel at 11:23 a.m. You responded at 11:31. I know. I never wanted to end. Real life is going to suck when we get back. Milo looked like he was going to be sick. I drove myself to the ER, sat alone in the waiting room, listened to a doctor I'd never met explain that I was miscarrying. 8 weeks along, nothing they could do. These things happen. My voice finally cracked. I came home to this empty apartment and grieved alone while you were getting couples massages and texting your mistress about how much you loved her. The silence that followed was absolute. Milo sat frozen in the chair, his face the color of chalk. There was a baby, he finally whispered. There isn't anymore. I finished my wine in one long swallow. And you weren't here for any of it because you were too busy lying to my face and building a life with someone else. He started crying, actually crying. His shoulders shook. Tears ran down his face. Isla, I'm so sorry. God, I'm so sorry. If I'd known, if you'd told me. You didn't know because you didn't answer your phone. My control finally snapped. You didn't know because you were too busy betraying me to care what was happening at home. I stood up, grabbed the lease agreement I'd found earlier, and threw it onto the coffee table between us. Let's talk about what you did know. Let's talk about this. Milo looked down at the papers. His face went even paler. A 2-bedroom apartment in Williamsburg. Lease signed by you and Hazel Pearson. Move-in date December 1st. 3 weeks from now. I counted off on my fingers. Security deposit, first and last month's rent. Furniture already ordered. $30,000 from our savings account. Money you told me was a short-term investment that would come back with interest. I spread out all the papers. The lease. The furniture receipts. The paint swatches. You've been planning this for months, Milo. Not just the affair. The exit. You were going to wait until after Christmas so you wouldn't look like the bad guy who abandoned his wife during the holidays. Then you'd tell me some story about how we'd grown apart, how it was mutual, how these things just happen sometimes. I pointed to the furniture receipts. You picked out a couch with her, a dining table, A bedroom set. You chose paint colors. Pale blue for the living room, sage green for the bedroom. Every word was a hammer blow. Milo sat there with his head in his hands, shoulders shaking, but I couldn't stop. You signed a 2-year lease, Milo. 2 years. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a moment of weakness. This was systematic planning. This was you deliberately building a new life while lying to me every single day. How did you find all this? His voice was muffled by his hand. Does it matter? Because you got sloppy? Because you underestimated me. I laughed, bitter and sharp. You thought I was too trusting to question you, too comfortable in our marriage to suspect anything, too invested to look for evidence. I gestured to the Instagram photo still displayed on my phone. You got caught by social media, Milo. Some random woman at a bachelorette party posted a photo of you and Hazel looking like newlyweds at a romantic restaurant. My college roommate's cousin. She recognized you and sent it to Sarah, who forwarded it to me. I shook my head. All your careful planning, all your separate lies to different people, all your encrypted text messages and secret credit cards. And you got caught because you forgot about Instagram. Milo finally looked up at me. His face was wet with tears. His eyes were red and swollen. I never meant to hurt you, he said. But you did. You are. I stayed standing. Every second you sit there trying to make yourself feel better with apologies doesn't change anything. The silence stretched between us. Outside I could hear traffic from the street. Someone's TV playing through the thin walls. Normal life continuing while ours fell apart. What happens now? Milo finally asked. I looked at him. This man I'd loved for 11 years. This stranger who'd become a person I didn't recognize. Now, I said quietly. Now you leave. Now you leave. The words hung in the air between us. Milo stared at me like he was waiting for me to take them back, to soften them, to give him some opening to negotiate. I didn't. You can't be serious, he finally said. Slaw, we need to talk about this. We need to figure out. There's nothing to figure out. The apartment is in my name. You're the one who had the affair. You're the one who stole from our savings. You're the one who lied for 18 months. I crossed my arms. So you're the one who leaves. He stood up slowly like his legs weren't working properly. Where am I supposed to go? I don't care. Your brother's. A hotel. The apartment in Williamsburg you already rented. I walked to the door and opened it. Just not here. Not tonight. Milo grabbed his phone from the coffee table, started dialing. I watched him try Hazel's number. Once, twice, 3 times. Each call going straight to voicemail. She's not answering, he said, panic creeping into his voice. Why isn't she answering? Maybe she's busy, I suggested, my tone flat. He tried again, and again. I counted 23 calls over the next hour while he paced our living room, each one going unanswered. He switched to texting, his thumbs flying across the screen. Something's wrong, he kept saying. Hazel always answers. Always. Something must have happened. I almost laughed at the irony. The woman he'd destroyed our marriage for was now leaving him in the lurch. But I kept my face neutral and said nothing. Around midnight, when it became clear Hazel wasn't going to respond, Milo finally grabbed some clothes and left. I heard him on the phone in the hallway calling his brother Ryan, asking if he could crash there for a few days. I locked the door behind him and stood in the sudden silence of the apartment. Our apartment. My apartment now. Then I poured myself another glass of wine and waited. The next morning I woke to 17 missed calls from Milo. I ignored all of them and made coffee. Around 10 he showed up at the door. I didn't let him in, just stood in the doorway blocking his entrance. Hazel's gone, he said. He looked like he hadn't slept. His eyes were bloodshot, his clothes wrinkled. She called in sick to work. Indefinite leave. Her roommate said she packed up and left last night. Just disappeared. Hey, I said. Okay, that's all you have to say. His voice rose. Isla, she won't answer my calls. She won't respond to texts. I went to her apartment and her roommate said she seemed upset, said something about needing space and just left. Where would she go? I sipped my coffee. I have no idea, Milo. She's your girlfriend. You should know her better than I do. Don't call her that. He ran his hands through his hair. It wasn't like that, wasn't it? You signed a lease with her, picked out furniture, planned a life together. What would you call it? He had no answer for that. I need to come in, he said. Get more of my things. Fine. You have 10 minutes. I stepped aside. He moved through the apartment like a ghost, gathering clothes, toiletries, his laptop. I watched him from the doorway, sipping my coffee, feeling nothing. I'm going to fix this, he said as he was leaving. I'm going to figure out what happened with Hazel and then I'm going to fix things with you. With us. There is no us anymore, Milo. I started closing the door. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be. What Milo didn't know, what I hadn't told him, was that I knew exactly where Hazel had gone. And I knew exactly why. On day 9 of Milo's trip, while I was deep into my investigation, I discovered something about Hazel that changed everything. Her social media profiles were set to private, but her husband's weren't. Marcus Whitaker, high school English teacher. His Instagram was public, filled with family photos. Hazel, Marcus, two little girls, maybe 7 and 9 years old, at the beach, at birthday parties, on camping trips. The most recent photo from 3 weeks ago showed them at a pumpkin patch. The caption read, "Fall family time. So grateful for these three." Hazel had a family, a husband, children, 2 little girls who called her mommy and had no idea their mother was planning to leave them for my husband. I'd stared at those photos for an hour, feeling sick. Those children, those innocent children who were about to have their lives destroyed. I'd agonized over what to do for a full day. It wasn't my place to blow up Hazel's life, wasn't my responsibility to tell her husband what she'd done. But then I'd thought about Marcus, about how he was being lied to just like I was, about how he deserved to know the truth before Hazel could spin her own version of events. I'd created an anonymous email account, attached every piece of evidence I had, the Instagram photos, the hotel receipts, the text messages between Hazel and Milo planning their future together. I'd titled the email simply, "I'm sorry you have to find out this way," and I'd sent it to Marcus's school email address, which was listed on the high school's website. 3 days after Milo came home, my phone rang from an unknown number. "Is this Isla Brennan?" The voice was male, hoarse, like he'd been crying. "Yes." "Who's this?" "Marcus Whitaker, Hazel's husband." He paused. "I think we need to talk about our spouses." We met at a small coffee shop in Brooklyn the next afternoon. I recognized him immediately from his Instagram photos, though he looked older now, tired. His eyes were kind but sad. "Thank you for meeting me," he said as we sat down with our coffees. "I know this must be strange. No stranger than anything else that's happened this week." He pulled out his phone. "Did you send me that email? The anonymous one?" I hesitated, then nodded. "I'm sorry. I know it wasn't my place, but don't apologize." He set his phone on the table between us. "I needed to know. I deserved to know." He looked at me. "How long have you known about them?" 8 days. "You?" 4. He rubbed his face. "Hazel told me she was going to Florida for a girls' trip. Old college friends. Said they'd been planning it for months. She sent me photos every day. Beaches, restaurants, telling me she missed me and the girls. Milo told me it was a work trip to Miami. Critical client pitch. Sent me photos of conference rooms." Marcus shook his head. "They coordinated everything. The timing, the lies. She even used old photos of our daughters and posted them as Instagram stories so I'd think everything was normal." I showed him my credit card statements. They charged everything to our joint accounts. $480 for a couple's massage. Romantic dinners every night. "I found their lease," Marcus said quietly, "for the apartment in Williamsburg. She told me she'd withdrawn $15,000 from our savings for a teaching certification program. It was her half of their secret love nest." His voice cracked. "My daughter's college fund. She stole from her own children." We sat in silence for a moment. "How old are your girls?" I asked. 7 and 9, Mira and Sophie. He showed me a photo on his phone. 2 beautiful little girls with gap-toothed smiles. "They don't know yet. I haven't told them." "How do you explain that mommy chose someone else's husband over her own family?" My throat tightened. "I'm so sorry, Marcus. I keep thinking about what I missed," he said. "The signs. She started dressing differently about 6 months ago. Bought new clothes. Went to the gym more. Was on her phone constantly. And I actually thought she was just feeling good about herself. Being healthy. I never imagined." "I did the same thing," I admitted. "Milo started wearing cologne I didn't buy. Suddenly cared about his appearance. Came home from long work days energized instead of exhausted. And I told myself I was being paranoid. That I was being a jealous, suspicious wife for even wondering." "We trusted them," Marcus said simply. "That's not a flaw. That's what you're supposed to do in a marriage." We ordered more coffee, then lunch. The conversation stretched from 1 hour to 3. 2 strangers bonded by the same betrayal, comparing notes, sharing evidence, finding comfort in not being alone. "I filed for divorce yesterday," Marcus said as we were finishing our second round of coffee. "My lawyer said I have a strong case. The affair, the financial deception, the abandonment of our children. I'm meeting with a lawyer next week," I said. "I have all the evidence documented. Credit cards, text messages, the lease agreement, everything." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he looked at me. "What if we filed on the same day? A solidarity thing. Show them that their victims aren't just rolling over." The idea appealed to me. "I like that. A united front." We exchanged lawyer information, shared our evidence files. made plans to stay in touch through the process. As we stood outside the coffee shop preparing to leave, Marcus said, "Thank you for sending that email, for giving me the truth. My daughters deserve better than a mother who lies to them, and I deserve better than a wife who steals from us to build a life with someone else." I hugged him, this stranger who somehow understood me better than anyone else right now. "We're going to be okay," I said. The words felt more real this time. Eventually, he agreed. He squeezed my hand. "Take care of yourself, Isla." I watched him walk away, disappearing into the Brooklyn afternoon. Then I stood there for a moment, breathing in the cold November air, feeling something shift inside me. I'd spent the past week focused on Milo's betrayal, on my own pain and anger. But talking to Marcus, seeing the collateral damage, those two little girls who were about to have their world shattered, made it all feel more real, more consequential. This wasn't just about me and Milo anymore. It was about Hazel's children, about Marcus, about all the people affected by two selfish people who'd thought only about what they wanted. My phone buzzed. "Milo again. Please, can we talk? I need to understand what happened. Where did Hazel go?" I looked at the message for a long moment, then I typed back, "Ask her husband." I sent that text to Milo, "Ask her husband," and watched the three dots appear immediately, disappear, appear again, then nothing. 10 minutes later my phone rang. I let it go to voicemail, then it rang again, and again. Finally a text, "What husband? What are you talking about?" I didn't respond. Let him figure it out. Let him realize that Hazel had been lying to him just as much as he'd been lying to me. The next morning I had an appointment I'd made a week ago, one I hadn't told Milo about. Victoria Nash's office was in downtown Brooklyn. All glass and steel and expensive minimalism. She came highly recommended, a divorce attorney with a reputation for being ruthless when she needed to be and strategic always. I walked in with my evidence folder now expanded to over 60 pages. Every credit card statement, every text message, every receipt, the lease agreement, the Instagram photos, Marcus's contact information in case we needed him to testify. Victoria's assistant led me to a conference room. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Brooklyn Bridge. The furniture was sleek and modern. Everything about the space said, "I win." Victoria walked in 5 minutes later, mid-40s, impeccably dressed, with the kind of confident presence that made you trust her immediately. "Isla Brennan?" She extended her hand. "Victoria Nash. Thank you for coming in." We sat across from each other at the conference table. I slid my folder toward her. "I need a divorce," I said, "and I need to make sure my husband faces every consequence for what he's done." Victoria opened the folder, started reading. I watched her face remain professionally neutral as she went through page after page of evidence. When she finally looked up, she smiled. Not a warm smile, the smile of a predator who just spotted prey. "This is a divorce attorney's dream case," she said. "Documented affair spanning 18 months. Misappropriation of marital funds. Secret apartment lease signed without your knowledge. Abandonment during a medical emergency." She tapped the folder. "The judge is going to absolutely crucify him." Something in my chest loosened slightly. Validation. Professional, legal validation that what Milo had done was as bad as it felt. "The secret apartment is especially damning," Victoria continued. "This isn't a moment of weakness or a mistake. This is premeditated abandonment. He was planning his exit while stealing from your joint savings." She flipped to another page. $30,000. Without your knowledge or consent. That's financial fraud. She looked at me directly. "What do you want out of this, Isla? What's your goal?" I'd been thinking about this question for days. "I want the apartment. It's in my name anyway, but I want it official. I want compensation for every dollar he spent on her. Every romantic dinner, every hotel room, every expense that should have been ours but went to them." I paused. "And I want the truth on record. I want it documented that he had an affair, that he stole from me, that he abandoned me during a medical emergency. I don't want him able to tell people we just grew apart, or make it sound mutual. I want everyone to know exactly what he did." Victoria nodded, making notes. "Then we file for fault divorce citing adultery and financial misconduct. We document everything, every lie, every stolen dollar, every betrayal. We make it impossible for him to rewrite this story." "How long will it take?" "Depends on whether he fights it. If he's smart and takes a settlement, maybe 6 to 8 weeks. If he forces us to trial," he shrugged, "could be 6 months. But given the evidence you have, I don't think he'll want a trial. Everything you've documented will become public record. His employer will see it, his family, everyone." Something about that felt right. Not revenge exactly, but justice, truth, accountability. "Let's file," I said. The next 3 weeks were a blur of paperwork and strategy sessions. Victoria was thorough, methodical. She went through every document, cross-referenced everything, built the case like she was preparing for trial even though she thought we'd settle. Always prepare for the worst, she told me. Hope for settlement, plan for war. Milo tried everything to avoid the lawyers. Showed up at the apartment at 7 in the morning before I left for work, looking disheveled and desperate. Isla, please. We can work this out. We don't need lawyers. This doesn't have to get ugly. I stood in the doorway, blocking his entrance. It's already ugly, Milo. It got ugly when you lied to me for 18 months, when you stole our savings, when you left me alone during the miscarriage. I didn't know about the baby, because you didn't answer your phone. My voice rose despite my attempt to stay calm. You didn't know because you were too busy betraying me to care what was happening at home. His face crumpled. If I'd known, I would have come home. I would have been there. Would you? I asked quietly. Or would you have been annoyed that I was interrupting your romantic vacation? He had no answer for that. When direct appeals didn't work, he went to my parents. That was a mistake. My father called me that evening, his voice tight with controlled fury. Your mother and I just had a very interesting visit from Milo. I can imagine. He stood in our living room and tried to blame you for his affair. Said you'd grown distant. Said the marriage had problems. Said you weren't giving him what he needed. My father paused. I told him to get out of our house. Dad, no, Isla. I've known that boy for 11 years. I welcomed him into our family. I trusted him with my daughter, and he sat in my living room and tried to make you responsible for his choices. His voice cracked slightly. Your mother and I support you 100%. Whatever you need, money, somewhere to stay, anything, you tell us. My mother got on the phone. When this is over, sweetheart, we're taking you on a trip. Somewhere beautiful. Somewhere Milo has never been. Somewhere you can start fresh. After they hung up, I sat in my apartment and cried. Not from sadness but from gratitude. From the relief of being believed, being supported, not having to defend or explain or justify. 3 weeks after I'd first met with Victoria, she filed the divorce petition. The terms were brutal but fair. I kept the apartment, 70% of all marital assets, full reimbursement for the $47,000 Milo had spent on Hazel over 18 months. Every dinner, every hotel, every couple's massage, all documented. A statement acknowledging his adultery and financial misconduct. And Milo would pay all legal fees, both his lawyer's and mine. When his lawyer delivered the terms, Milo called me within the hour. 70%? His voice was high, strained. That's insane. No judge would ever award you that much. I'd been expecting this call. Had rehearsed my response. Actually, Victoria thinks a judge would award me more. Once they hear about the financial fraud, the secret apartment, the abandonment during a medical emergency. 70% is generous. This is vindictive. You're trying to punish me. I'm trying to be compensated for what you took from our marriage. If you'd rather go to trial and have all of this become public record, including testimony from Hazel's husband about how your affair destroyed his family and hurt his 2 young daughters, we can do that. Your choice. Silence. Long and heavy. Hazel's husband knows? His voice was barely a whisper. Marcus knows everything. We've compared notes. He's willing to testify about the impact on his children if this goes to trial. More silence. You contacted him. It wasn't a question. You told him. I gave him the same truth I got. The same evidence. He deserved to know what his wife was doing. You destroyed everything, Milo said, his voice hollow. You systematically destroyed both our lives. I documented what you destroyed, I corrected. There's a difference. You made the choices. You had the affair. You stole the money. You signed the lease. I just made sure everyone knew the truth. He hung up without responding. 6 weeks later, we reached a settlement. Milo's lawyer had advised him that going to trial would likely result in worse terms. That a judge who heard about the miscarriage abandonment and saw all the documented financial fraud would not be sympathetic. Milo agreed to everything. 70-30 split, full reimbursement, acknowledgement of fault, payment of all legal fees. The signing happened in Victoria's conference room on a gray January morning. Milo arrived looking like he'd aged a decade, hollow-eyed, thinner, defeated. We sat across from each other while lawyers shuffled papers. Neither of us spoke. The only sounds were pages turning and pens scratching. When it was time to sign, Milo hesitated, his pen hovering over the paper. I really did love you, Isla. His voice was quiet. I know you don't believe that, but I did. I got lost. I made terrible choices. I'm sorry. I looked at him. This man I'd built 11 years with. This stranger who'd destroyed everything we'd created. Sorry doesn't undo anything, I said. It doesn't bring back the baby. It doesn't erase the lies. It doesn't rebuild trust. It's just a word people say when they want to feel better about themselves. I signed my name. He signed his. Just like that, it was over. Milo left without looking back. Victoria shook my hand, told me I'd done the right thing. I gathered my things and walked out into the cold January afternoon. Somewhere in the city, Milo was processing the end of his marriage. Somewhere in Connecticut, Hazel was dealing with her own divorce. And here I was, standing on a Brooklyn street corner, legally free. I waited to feel something: relief, satisfaction, victory. Instead, I just felt empty. But it was a different kind of empty than before. Not the hollowness of betrayal, the clean emptiness of a finished chapter, of a door closing so another could open. I pulled out my phone and texted Marcus. "It's done. Settlement signed. How are you holding up?" His response came quickly. "Same. Signed mine yesterday. The girls are adjusting." "Foley, how are you?" "One day at a time," I typed back. "That's all any of us can do," he replied. I put my phone away and started walking. Not toward home yet, just walking, through Brooklyn, past coffee shops and bookstores, past couples holding hands and parents with strollers, past all the normal life continuing around me. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like maybe I could eventually be part of that normal life again. Not yet, but someday. I walked through Brooklyn for over an hour after leaving Victoria's office, past the bookstore on Court Street where Milo and I used to browse on Sunday mornings, past the Italian restaurant where we'd celebrated our 5th anniversary, past the park where we talked about buying a house someday, raising kids, growing old together. Every block held a memory, every corner a ghost of who we used to be. By the time I got back to the apartment, it was dark. I stood in the doorway for a moment before going inside, suddenly aware that this was my space now, completely mine. No one else's belongings mixed with mine. No one else's schedule to coordinate with. No one else's preferences to consider. Just me. I walked through the rooms slowly, seeing them differently. The couch where I'd confronted Milo. The kitchen where I'd asked about the illness. The bedroom where he'd packed for Key West while lying to my face. Every space held the ghost of our marriage. The weight of what used to be here and wasn't anymore. I spent the next week in a strange fog. Going to work, coming home, existing but not really living. My co-workers tiptoed around me, offering sympathetic looks but not asking questions. My boss gave me lighter assignments without comment. Everyone knew I was getting divorced. No one knew what to say about it. The following Saturday, I decided to pack up Milo's remaining things. The items he'd left behind when he grabbed clothes that first night. His books on the shelves. His coffee mugs in the kitchen. The framed photo from our wedding that I'd taken down but hadn't thrown away. I worked methodically, boxing everything with the same systematic precision I'd used to gather evidence. Each item went into a box labeled with masking tape. His clothes, his books, his miscellaneous items. 12 years of accumulated life reduced to cardboard and packing tape. I texted him when I was done. "Your things are packed. Pick them up this weekend." He showed up Saturday morning with hired movers. I watched from the living room window as they loaded box after box into a truck. Milo stood on the sidewalk, hands in his pockets, looking small and defeated. For a moment I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Then I remembered the couple's massage, the romantic dinners, the 17 unanswered calls while I was losing our baby. And the sympathy evaporated. After they left, I sat in the empty living room and cried. Not for Milo, not for the marriage, but for the woman I'd been 3 months ago. The one who'd trusted completely, who'd believed in forever, who'd thought love was enough. That woman was gone, and I mourned her. My mother showed up around 7 that evening, let herself in with the spare key I'd given her years ago. She didn't ask if I was okay, didn't offer platitudes about time healing wounds. Just sat beside me on the couch and held my hand while I cried. When I was done, she made tea, ordered Thai food from the place down the street, stayed the night, sleeping beside me like she used to when I was little and had nightmares. "You're going to be okay," she whispered in the dark. "It doesn't feel like it now, but you will be." I wanted to believe her. 2 weeks after the divorce was finalized, Sarah came down from Boston for the weekend. We met at a wine bar in Park Slope, settling into a corner booth with a bottle of Pinot Grigio. "Tell me everything," she said, "from the beginning." So I did. The Instagram photo, the credit card charges, the confrontation, the miscarriage, the divorce settlement, all of it. Sarah listened without interrupting, her expressions cycling through shock, anger, and something that looked like fierce pride. "The miscarriage," she said when I finished. "Isla, you went through that alone. Why didn't you call me?" "Because I was ashamed," I admitted. I felt stupid for not seeing the affair earlier, like I should have known, like I'd failed somehow. "You didn't fail. He did." Sarah grabbed my hand across the table. "He betrayed you in the worst possible way and you survived it. More than survived, you fought back. That question about the illness." She laughed despite the serious conversation. "That was brilliant. Terrifying but brilliant." We ordered a second bottle of wine. What you did, Sarah continued, gathering evidence, demanding accountability, sending that email to Hazel's husband, that wasn't vindictive. That was self-preservation. You refused to let them rewrite history. She raised her glass. To you. To surviving betrayal with your dignity intact. To being the kind of strong that scares mediocre men. We clinked glasses, and for the first time in months I felt something warm in my chest. Not happiness exactly, but the possibility of it. The knowledge that someday I might feel normal again. A month after the divorce, Marcus texted me. Custody hearing went well. Girls are staying with me. How are you holding up? We've been checking in sporadically. Two people bonded by the same betrayal, offering support from our unique position of understanding. One day at a time, I replied. How about you? Same. But we're still standing. That counts for something. We made plans to meet for coffee the following week. Marcus looked better than he had at our last meeting. Less hollow, more present. There was color in his face again. Life in his eyes. I told the girls yesterday, he said, stirring sugar into his coffee. Age-appropriate version. Just that mom and dad weren't going to be married anymore. That mom made choices that hurt our family. How'd they take it? Better than I expected. Worse than I hoped. He smiled sadly. They asked if it was their fault. Broke my heart. I told them absolutely not. That this was grown-up stuff they didn't need to worry about. We talked about logistics. His plans to stay in their house for stability. My consideration of moving to a different neighborhood. The practical details of rebuilding. Have you heard from Milo? Marcus asked. Once. An email apologizing. I didn't respond. Hazel sent me 3 handwritten letters, explaining her journey, how she found herself. He made air quotes. I burned them. I laughed. Actual laughter. Felt foreign but good. We're going to be okay, Marcus said as we were leaving. It doesn't feel like it most days, but I think we will be. Eventually, I agreed. On a cold February evening, I stood at my living room window looking out at Brooklyn. The city stretched before me, millions of lights and millions of windows. Each one a life, a story, some probably like mine, ending, rebuilding, surviving, others just beginning. The apartment felt different now. I'd rearranged furniture, painted the bedroom a soft gray, bought new curtains, small changes that made the space feel more mine and less ours. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Hi Isla, this is James from your building. We've crossed paths a few times in the lobby. Anyway, some neighbors are getting drinks tomorrow night if you'd like to join. No pressure. Just thought you might want to get out. James, for C. The guy with the kind smile who always held the elevator, who'd asked how I was doing during the worst of the divorce, who seemed genuinely nice without any agenda. A drink with neighbors, normal people doing normal things. It felt terrifying and exciting in equal measure. Maybe, I typed back, can I let you know tomorrow? Of course, hope you come. I set down my phone and looked back at the window, at my reflection in the glass, at the woman looking back at me. She looked older, tired, but also stronger somehow, like she'd been through fire and come out the other side changed but intact. I wasn't healed, wasn't whole, but I was surviving. The woman who'd helped Milo pack for his business trip felt like a stranger now. That version of me had been naive, trusting, willing to ignore instincts in favor of comfort. I'd become someone different, someone who demanded honesty, who knew her worth, who wouldn't accept lies over truth no matter how uncomfortable the truth was. Somewhere in this city, Milo was rebuilding his life after losing everything. Somewhere, Hazel was trying to repair her relationship with her daughters. And here I was, standing in my apartment, contemplating drinks with a neighbor, taking the first small step toward something new. I wasn't ready to trust again, wasn't ready to open myself up to the vulnerability that relationships required. Maybe I wouldn't be for a long time, but maybe that was okay. Maybe healing didn't mean rushing into the next thing. Maybe it meant learning to be alone without being lonely, learning to be enough on my own. I turned from the window and looked around my apartment, my space, my life, my future that was uncertain but entirely mine. Tomorrow maybe I'd go get those drinks, maybe I wouldn't, but the point was that it was my choice, my decision, my life to build however I wanted. I made dinner, called my mother to chat about nothing important, watched a movie I'd been meaning to see. Normal things, small things. The building blocks of a life being rebuilt one day at a time. Outside, February wind rattled the windows. Inside I sat in my space, warm and safe and quiet, and for the first time in 3 months, that quiet didn't feel lonely. It felt like peace. Not complete peace. Not the kind where everything was resolved and healed, but the beginning of it, the first small stirring of something that might eventually become okay. I got ready for bed, brushed my teeth, changed into pajamas. Ordinary rituals that felt significant somehow in their normalcy. As I turned off the lights, I thought about that question I'd asked Milo. Do you know what illness she has? It had been psychological warfare, calculated cruelty designed to make him panic, to make him feel a fraction of what I'd felt. And it had worked perfectly. But looking back now, I realized it had been more than that. It had been the moment I stopped being a victim and became something else. Someone who fought back. Someone who demanded accountability. Someone who survived. I climbed into bed and pulled the covers up. Outside, Brooklyn continued its endless motion. Inside, I lay in the darkness and let myself feel the weight of everything that had happened. The betrayal, the grief, the anger, the revenge, the settlement, the ending, and underneath it all, quiet but growing, the possibility of a new beginning. I wasn't there yet, but I would be, eventually. And that, I told myself as I drifted toward sleep, had to be worth something. It had to be. If this story of calculated revenge had you hooked from that first question, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Isla asked about the illness and watched Milo's face drain of color. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more jaw-dropping stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.